Welcome to Who Are You, a CSI podcast. I'm Lauren, and I've seen CSI through and through around 3 to 4 times.
And I'm Nick. This is my first time experiencing these episodes.
And today we are reviewing Season 2, Episode 17, Felonious Monk. Original air date is March 7, 2002. Director is Kenneth Fink. Writers are Anthony E. Zeiker and Jerry Stahl. We start today's episode with a few shots of the Vegas Strip before we meander over to a temple. But before we get to the temple, Nick, what is our Vegas score for today's episode?
Our Vegas score is a respectable 31.
Okay. So pretty good.
There's 3 interspaced scenes throughout the episode that I clocked.
I did notice that. I take note of those better now. And I was like, there's a lot of segue scenes of Vegas.
I feel like there's more of that this season in general. I wonder if that'll sort of be the new MO. It'll be interesting to see. I'm definitely glad that I changed the rules for Vegas scoring this season. I also want to take a moment to shout out the title of this
Felonious Monk.
Yeah, I feel like most titles have a little something going on with them. But it was a Felonious Monk, I think, right?
Yep.
Is the jazz musician, but also one of my favorite a cappella bands, Straight No Chaser.
Oh, so good. I love Straight No Chaser.
Named after a Felonious Monk song.
Oh, I didn't know that.
A very famous Felonious Monk song is a very famous jazz I forget. I don't really know how to talk about jazz music. I'm not a big musician person, but I know that, in researching that band on Wikipedia, I was like, oh, it's named after this, and it's the title song on this album of the same name, and it's known because it's kind of unlocked. It's one of the famous sort of compositions of jazz music from that time. And so I saw the name and I was like, what is this? Oh yeah, it's Felonious Monk. And I was like, all right, no, that was good. And also it took me a second to realize what felonious meant. Which, as a burgeoning podcaster for a CSI crime scene, I should know what the word felonious means. It really wasn't until 5 or 6 minutes into the episode I went, oh right, that's what right there, because it's a felony. Oh yeah, I get it.
It's a felonious act.
That was my. I thought it was worth, just for that epithet alone, worth calling that out.
Yeah,
it's a great title name.
I think that's fair. And so we go to a temple. People are chanting. We go to a group, 4 to be precise, of monks praying. And then we see a gun being lifted to one of them. And then we hear several gunshots. This brings us to Grissom and Sarah on scene. Nick is already there. I want to say this right off the bat. Not a great Nick episode.
No.
Nick does not look good in this episode. So he is immediately disrespectful to the monks and is like, oh yeah, that guy in the robe. And even Grissom is like, you mean the monk? The very obvious monk, Nick? Nick, he just instantly has a disdain for these guys. And I don't understand what his problem is.
There's a whole subplot of anti-monk behavior, and that I'm
but
is
Nick,
this a thing?
But Nick is part of it, which makes no sense. Who is later part of it sort of makes sense, but
they consistently make Nick the bigot of this show.
Yeah,
which I don't like because he shares a name with me.
This is true.
Yeah.
So
I want to like him.
They go inside the temple, and
the monk is our first spot the guest.
Oh, all right. Okay. All right.
This one's kind of a weird one because I was like, I definitely know this guy.
So Mark Dacascos?
Yeah, Dacascos.
Dacascos. Okay.
I think this is another one. So the thing I clocked is he's in several 11 episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. which I started to watch.
Yeah.
And then a couple things he's in that I've also he's in the John Wick 3 movie, which I don't remember him from that. It might be a really short part.
His character name is Zero. I've only seen the first John Wick, so I cannot comment on chapter 3.
He was also an episode of Lucifer, which is a show I watched a lot, but he's only one episode.
I just got to that and I was like, maybe that's where I sort of recognize him from.
I think he's one of those guys who's in a bunch of things.
Yes.
He's a very sort of stoic face. He's very large eyes, big brow. He just depends what one of his images on IMDb. When I look at that image, I was like, yeah, I know this guy. And it's not from anything.
Yeah. You were just I know that face.
It's it doesn't say from the show, but yeah, I think he's he plays like a lot. I think just a lot of characters in a lot
Yeah.
of shows, and so I think I've collected,
Yeah, enough sightings of him.
So here's the thing. I think he's in the Iron Chef America show, and he might even be the fake Iron Chef.
Oh, okay. I've never seen Iron Chef, so I can't comment on that one.
He is. All right. I just clicked on it. He's in 245 episodes of Iron Chef America as the chairman.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Which actually might be the thing I most know him from.
No, that makes sense.
Because he's in like the suit jacket picture, and I was like, that's definitely the version of this guy I know.
Yes, and so it's from that.
Yeah, I think it's from that. But then also, I definitely know him from 11 episodes of Agents of Shield, because that's a lot of episodes.
That is it.
I watched every episode of that show. So,
that's a significant amount of episodes.
So not a huge about the guest star. Certainly not the biggest one of this episode.
Not the biggest one of the episode.
The next one is the next one is kind of also a mismatch character.
Okay.
So when we get there, I'll let you know.
All right, sounds great. So they go inside the temple. Sarah is pointing out that it seems strange that they left like gold statues, like money trees are there. Like, it doesn't seem to be a robbery. There's plenty of things that if this was a robbery could have been grabbed and taken, but were left there. And then they notice a like gang sign from this gang called the Snakebacks, which we'll circle back to later. It's a little bit of a red herring, but
this gang sign has to be one of the dumbest looking gang signs I've ever seen.
It looks like a bee. Like it's very lame. It's not a good looking tag by any stretch of the imagination.
I hope it's not a real gang sign, and that if it is, none of those people are listening to the podcast. Yeah. But I was like, really? That's what you came up with?
Yeah. Not their best work on CSI for sure. So we get a look at the sign. That brings us to credits. We come back to Grissom in the garden area of the temple. He finds a rifle. Detective O'Reilly is then with the monk, who is called Ananda. And he was saying that he wasn't at the temple at the time of the shooting because he was at the bank. We leave this storyline for a bit. We go to Catherine. She enters a bar. She meets up with a man who we learn later on his name is Jimmy. And we learn
next Spot the Guest Star.
I was gonna say this has to be the next Spot the Guest Star. Okay. So this is
I didn't know if you recognized him.
I had one of those moments where I was like, I think I just recognized him from this. And then as I was preparing to record, I was like, oh no, I might actually recognize him from like legitimately other things.
So this is Bruce McGill.
Yes.
He is in a million things
He's
you've probably seen.
So many things. His IMDb is absolutely insane.
Yeah, the most recent thing I definitely know him from is a few episodes of the TV show Suits. I was shocked. This show has come up before. He was in 105 episodes of Rizzoli and Isles, which I've never watched. But there's probably some people out there who have seen that show.
Oh, he was in Star Trek Voyager. I do remember him.
Yeah, he was in Voyager, and he was in Legally Blonde 2.
I've not seen Legally Blonde 2. I've only seen Legally Blonde. Yeah. So.
And it's funny, I was clicking through the pictures, so sometimes I've learned to like click through the photographs and see.
Yeah, that helps like refresh your memory.
I remember this character, right?
Yes.
As opposed to like remember this actor. He was in Animal House. Which
okay.
I haven't seen in like 25 years. I couldn't tell you the first thing about it. But he is in so many things.
He's in so many things.
He has the same sort of voice, and his
first credit is from 1977.
Yeah. So he's in quite a few things. I think if you've seen him in something, the odds are you probably have. But yeah, he was. I was like, oh man, I was like, this is a good Spot the Guest Star episode. Man, was I shocked later on this episode. Where we get arguably as big as our biggest Spot the Guest Star.
I would agree.
Which is Jeremy Renner in a prior episode.
Yes.
So we'll save that for when we get there. But yeah, I thought it was really good. We also have a failed product placement coming up. So
sweet. I don't know. Man, I love it.
I don't know if you'll mention it, and I don't know if I'll remember the exact moment.
Okay.
I think I will.
But I'll probably give you enough context that if I don't mention it, it will at least like...
Yeah. I thought it was, and then I looked it up, and I went, nope, definitely not the right year for this to be a product placement for this product. I think it was just a directorial choice, and it was just a little weird.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
So Catherine meets our Spot the Guest Star, who is Jimmy, in this episode. We learned that he is basically the one that brought her into being a CSI. And she's asking him, though, about a man called Kelso's confession regarding Stephanie Watson. And so we see this confession, and he's admitting that he killed a man in Reno, but he is adamantly denying that he killed Stephanie Watson. Jimmy seems like, nope, like he's just, trying to make peace with God, and, it's not a big deal. They have a quick conversation about how the evidence never lies, which, spoiler, becomes very important later on in the episode. Yep. We stay with Catherine, but now she's with Warwick. They're in an evidence freezer. Catherine is terrified that the evidence has already been destroyed because the supposed murderer, died, so the evidence can be destroyed. Warwick finds it, though. Don't worry, finds the evidence box, and we learn as they are talking that the victim, Stephanie, was her best friend. So when they were both working in the strip club together, Stephanie was her best friend. So, this is a very personal, even though she didn't work on the case originally, it is a very personal case given her relationship with the victim. We then go to Detective O'Reilly. He's with the part-time cook at the temple. He's asking oh, do you have a key to get in? And he's like, I don't need one. They always keep the door open. And he's asking have they had any issues with gangs or any crime? And he's saying yes, but that Ananda didn't want to file a police report, so they didn't go to the police about it. And he kind of says several times about how the monks are too trusting. Yep. So we go back inside of the temple. Sarah is doing some work lifting the carpet. She finds a shoe print. We see Nick in the office of the temple. He's looking around. We go back.
This is our product placement.
Oh, is when he finds the magazine?
No.
Okay.
He pulls a CD off of the shelf.
Yes, he does.
Madonna Ray of Light. And you can see the cover of this CD for 8 seconds. It's really long. And I thought it's in my mind, those two periods of time are not so far away from each other.
No, yeah. No, I wouldn't I would say thinking back on it, I wouldn't think so.
That CD is from 1998 though, so it's
4
years earlier.
Okay.
So there's no way anyone's paying for a product placement for a 4-year-old CD.
No.
At a time when CDs are maybe first starting to go a little out of date. Other people are still ripping CDs and MP3s at this time, so I mean CDs are still big, but I thought oh my god, I can't believe why are they showing this for so. I went, oh, product placement. It's been a while, and then I was like, all right, I'm gonna do after the episode. I'm gonna do my research. I went, this CD is. I was like, I thought it was gonna come out around the time of the episode or something. I was like, this CD came out 4 years earlier. Someone just wanted. I think because Ray of Light, they thought that maybe somehow that had something to do with the Buddhist people, or maybe this was just supposed to be another random object they found and held on to.
Yeah.
Or to be here's a Western, here's a Western thing that these monks have, to sort of start telling that story. So before we get to the piece of evidence you were alluding to, that would have been a great product placement, by the way. The one at the bottom of the drawer.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but
that's what I was like, oh, that would be amazing if that was the product placement. I was gonna get so excited. I was like, is it the porno magazine at the bottom of the drawer? Because that would be astounding.
I don't think the FCC would like that one.
Probably not. That's a good point. This is before they get very, very raunchy. So we're kind of shifting in between the Sarah scenes and the Nick scenes, but we see Sarah lifting a boot print from the carpet or a shoe print. We also see her finding a smudge of paint on one of the statues. She's also pulls off a wad of gum. Nick finds not only a Madonna CD, but also a porn mag kind of hidden away in one of the drawers of the desk. This transitions us to Nick and Sarah outside talking. Nick does not like the monk, and he's convinced that he's the one who did it and that he must be hiding something because evidently you must be a horrible, horrible human being if you have a porno magazine. Yeah. Nick, who had a sexual relationship with a prostitute, is very judgmental about people that have porno magazines.
Yeah, or just judgmental about monks or something. Cause it's Sarah pushes back on him. He's like, "Oh, just give me a break, Sarah."
Yeah,
it's it was a very weird dialogue.
It's a very weird dialogue. So and then we go to Doc Robbins with Grissom. Doc Robbins, is examining the monks. He notes that they've all been shot in the third eye, which brings us to a very strange chakras lesson from Doc Robbins.
Very great use of visual effects at the time.
Yeah. They're just illuminating the different chakras as they're explaining them and naming them and saying kind of what they govern.
An acute jump to conclusions that this probably sets up my only favorite line from the entire episode at the end. But they alluding to, oh well, they shot him in the chakra. They must be a Buddhist practitioner.
Yes, they must be, because that's the only people that shoot people in the third eye is
Yeah.
those that follow the teachings of Buddhism. Yeah. So then we go to Greg Sanders with Catherine. He's letting her know in like re-examining the evidence that, you know, the first blood that he tested on the knife belongs to the victim Stephanie. The second belongs to Kelso, who, you know, they have accused of committing the murder. But then Catherine is like, I'm taking this to Trace. But instead just goes into a red room.
Yeah,
I'm
I was trying to figure out if that was supposed to be Trace.
I don't think so. In later seasons of CSI, that's definitely not Trace. So she goes into the red room, and this is weird because she kind of points out to Greg Sanders that there is a like weak sample of blood on the knife that was not originally tested. Because at the time, you know, this murder happened, I think they say like 15 years earlier, 10 or 15 years earlier. The capabilities of DNA were like nothing to what they were at the time of this episode, like filming. So they're like, hey, let's like run a sample of this and see if this gives us any additional information. Nick is with Grissom. This is where we learn that the rifle that Grissom recovered is in fact the murder weapon, and that there are prints on the rifle and they belong to the monk. So Nick is like, see, haha, told you. Grissom and Nick are then with the monk. He admits that he found the gun. Like it was like in his office, he found the gun. He then went to go like speak to his brothers and found them deceased, and then he put the gun outside before, you know, notifying authorities.
In all
And
fairness to the rest of this episode, it is very strange that you didn't just tell them exactly what happened the first time they talked to you.
yes, this is very true. So Nick has to bring up the magazine though.
Yeah.
Right? Has to bring up the porno magazine. And Ananda is saying, hey, like somebody left it here and I put it away in case they came back and they wanted it. Like I didn't want to get rid of somebody else's property. So I just, you know, stowed it away in case they wanted to, you know, come back and have access to it again. So
He says a great line that's like, you know, when you don't have like covet the flesh or whatever, it's no different than like a magazine of waterfalls or something.
Yeah, like it's just not, to him it's not salacious because it just
Yeah.
doesn't generate the same feelings that it would in somebody who, you know, gives in to, you know, the base pleasures of life.
But unlike Nick, he's not judgmental.
No, he's
So
not
he doesn't
judgmental at
judge
all.
if the person wants
No.
their porno magazine, they can just
No.
come back and get it.
Yeah, he's like, they can come back and get it. That's fine. We return to Greg Sanders and Catherine. They're having a nice little walking talk, but then it is interrupted by Eckley, so it's not as nice of a walk and talk. Eckley and Catherine then go into where Warwick is, and we learn that they. Oh, actually, I think before that happens, actually, I think Catherine reveals to Eckley that they found a third donor on the knife, so that there was another blood spot that doesn't match Kelso or Stephanie on the knife. And then they walk into where Warwick is, and this is where Warwick's like, "Hey, that glove, which was like a big part of the indicting evidence against Kelso, not in any of the crime scene pictures."
Yep.
Nowhere to be seen in crime scene pictures. Eckley doesn't seem to think that this is weird. Catherine and Warwick, not as easily convinced. And as they're discussing it, we learn that Jimmy logged in the glove as evidence 2 days after the murder.
Which is a big red flag.
Suspicious. Very, very suspicious.
Doesn't sound like Kelso had a very good lawyer.
No, not at all. So then we go to Sarah and Grissom. They're talking about the prints that were found on the rifle. And Sarah's explaining that, yes, like Ananda's prints are on the rifle, but he never fingered the trigger. And so she then shows like a computer model that shows like where his hand was on the rifle, but also like where the rifle would have been positioned, which is like pointing down. So he basically like picked it up by the barrel, you know, had the gun pointing down, and then they carried it outside. So she also lets Grissom know, though, that the gum that she collected is with DNA, so don't worry. We're gonna get some information from that wad of gum that they found in the scene.
Oh, this wad of gum. I have a question when we get to the very end of this.
Okay. Yeah, the gum plays a very important role in this.
I feel like I missed something twice. Or it just didn't happen. So yeah, we get to the final reveal.
Okay. All right. So Nick and Grissom are then with the gang carving, but I think Grissom points out that the gang hasn't been a thing for like a year.
Yeah. They've been disbanded or incarcerated.
So this is a false clue. Like, it's not the gang who left this mark at the temple. It's someone trying to, like, throw them off of the trail. David walks over. He got Grissom a meeting with the Air Force because, he's got connections because his dad.
His dad is a colonel?
Is a colonel? Some high, yeah.
That's a very high up position.
Yeah.
And you're working at a CSI lab? I mean...
David's doing what David loves to do. You go, David. I support you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe David doesn't want his dad's help, but I would say like, oh, maybe his dad's just a really good colonel, but you don't get to be a colonel without being a little politicky.
This is true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Up, but
yeah.
You don't get to the top.
So Grissom ends up talking to David's dad, and somehow without I feel like this is legally dubious, but he gets footage of the temple because there's a military base a few miles away, and thus the Air Force is monitoring the area video-wise, and so they just release the satellite images to CSI.
So this is two things here. One, first thing is I wrote 0 chance this would ever happen.
Yeah, no way.
0 chance he would tell Grissom how good the satellite is. Because that in itself is always a protected piece of information. But also, is this our first 9/11 reference?
I think so.
From 2002, right? So
we're only 2002.
We're only
like a year out.
And it was very people were very. It took a while in pop culture for people to
to start referencing it.
So they make a reference. Oh, ever since 9/11, we monitor with a satellite all the time. And I went, this is our first 9/11 reference. I was like, I don't know. Maybe I should start a charitable campaign where every time they reference 9/11, I donate $9.11 to like some survivors fund.
Yeah.
I mean, and see how broke it makes me. It'll peak in like 3 or 4 years.
Wait until we start reviewing CSI New York.
Oh no. How are my 401ks going?
Yeah, let's just not have that be a you if and when we get to review CSI New York.
Then we'll have to start donating 9.11 pesos per.
Yeah. You have to move to a different type of currency. Yeah.
911 yen.
So, after this conversation, which would never have happened in real life, Nick and Sarah approach Grissom outside. He's letting them know that only one vehicle passed the gate around the time of the murders, and so this allows a warrant for Sarah to search the truck that passed the gate, and then Nick and Grissom enter the coffee shop and spot the guest star. Time. The guy working behind the counter is Aaron Paul, who most people know from Breaking Bad.
Yep. Blockbuster spot the guest star. I will also say, I guess that this part of it doesn't really come up till later, but something that is very true about the very good big spot the guest stars is I think that there's a little bit of merit to the fact that they become big because they tend to give really good.
He did great in this episode.
Performances.
He did great.
And it's like you start to notice, you're like, wow, yeah, he's a good actor. That's why he got the next job, and then finally got
a break. Yeah.
Some of the guest stars, some of the acting is kind of just okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, they have to hire a lot of actors for this show, right? Yeah. Like, there's a lot of actors that they have to hire for this show, so not all of them are going to be great actors.
Yeah. But it's very telling that the ones that it's not only big actors who give great performances. No. All the people who've gone to be really great actors, they
have put in good performances.
Yeah, they're good actors to begin with. That's how they end up getting their shot. So, but yeah, I picked up on that later in the episode, and I was like, man, that's gonna be true. I think probably the rest of this, like every time there's a big person, like a big name, I'm gonna be clocking whether or not I think they did a really good job in this episode or not. Because so far we're like 3 for 3.
Yeah. So he's talking about how kind of the monks changed. Well, actually, no. Sorry. His dad walks over, which is, I realized as we were talking about, another spot the guest star. 4 spot the guest stars this episode.
I don't have him. I thought he might have been somebody, but I didn't have him down.
This is Marshall Bell. I know he's another one who's in a lot of things. You go to his IMDb, it's like a very impressive list. What I know him from and what his top credit on IMDb is General Owen from Starship Troopers.
Yes, so I saw that. I didn't remember. I looked at him. I like went on the second watch through, and I was like, no, it's not popping up the screen. But I was like, not only is Starship Troopers a really big movie that I watched probably like 10 times.
I watched it so many times.
Teenager.
So many times.
Yeah. But it's getting a lot of retraction because there's a new video game out called Helldivers 2 where they really like leaned into the tropes of Starship
Oh,
Troopers.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, it's like you run around as like a Marines and you shoot space bugs. So
okay.
Basically,
basically
the idea. It's like a first-person shooter versus bugs.
Yeah.
It's a cooperative kind of game too. It came out a couple months ago and it's been quite, maybe within a month, it's been quite popular. And so I saw it was Starship Troopers. I was like, oh, is he that guy? Like,
yeah.
And I was like, I don't know. I was like, I don't think I remember the movie well enough.
I saw it.
Watching it many times.
I saw it not too long ago. Like I saw it like within the last like 2 years. So
I think it went on Netflix or something.
It is on Netflix,
and a bunch of people were watching it.
Yeah, it's so good. It still holds up. Like it's still a really good movie. So
James, no, who's the main character? Casper Van Dien. I think.
Yes,
yeah.
I think you're right.
I think he's the main character.
Yeah. So his father walks over. He is even worse than Nick in his disdain for the monks. So he just thinks the monks are the reason why his business is declining and, they're just completely ruining the neighborhood. But Sarah walks in and is like, hey, found these beads in your truck. So that's weird.
Which are monk prayer beads, not other types of beads.
Yes, sorry, I should have been more specific. Again, watch the episode and then listen to this. Monk prayer beads are the sort of beads that were found in the truck. So Catherine is then at a strip club. She's talking to the owner for a bit. Jimmy comes in. They go outside. They kind of like walk through, the events of that night. And she starts pressing him about the glove. You could tell that she's suspicious and she just doesn't think that this glove is up to snuff. And he, at this point, he's not budging at the moment. We have a short scene with Greg Sanders examining the paint from the statue. Then we have Nick entering Grissom's office. He's letting him know that the dad's alibi checks out, but his son's doesn't. His son doesn't really have an alibi. Dad has an alibi. Greg Sanders enters with the results, and the paint from the statue in the temple is paintball paint.
Which I was like, can they really tell?
Because it's just diluted with water. It's just water soluble paint. There's plenty of uses for water soluble paint. But I think they do say at some point the plastic pieces.
Yeah,
so
they mentioned that later, but I was like, still.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good guess. Although I love where this leads to.
So this leads Grissom, Sarah, and Nick to a paintball field.
Yep, they just know exactly what paintball field.
Yeah, because there's only one. There's only
at
one
what time.
Yep, and then he's obviously going to be playing because he must play if he's not working or at school. He must be.
And where he would be on the entire field of play. It's not like you can't just walk around. You're gonna get shot.
You're gonna get shot, and those hurt. I've gotten paintballing before, and it hurts. So. Yeah, so they pull over the paintball field. Grissom is then with the dad and son in interrogation. The son is claiming that, he went to the temple, but he went there, weeks ago with friends. And Grissom is like, no, our test can kind of give us a timeline. You were probably there the day of the murders. And he then admits, or he claims that he was returning a statue that his friend lifted when they were there.
I like that. First he's like, I've never been there.
Yeah, never been there. And then very quickly was like, well, I was there with my friends. And he was like, well, I did go back. But
I broke and entered. We robbed.
Yeah.
But then he's like, oh, but that was like a week. And then they're like, no, you were there recently. And they're like, okay, I was there.
Yeah. So, but as he's admitting in one of his many admittances, as he's admitting that he was there, Grissom picks up on the fact that he says, well, I removed my boots and then I went and returned the statue. And Grissom's like, well, how would you have known? To remove your boots? And then this is where, again, just admitting all over the place. And again, no lawyer. Dad didn't seem to think a lawyer was going to be necessary for this. So no lawyer present. He admits to the monks being his friends. He's like, the monks, they were my friends. So yeah, that's how I knew about removing my boots, etc.
Yep.
Warren and Catherine are then kind of analyzing the gloves. They're back to the gloves. And Warwick is telling Catherine that he found saliva like on the knife and the glove, which leads them to believe that the blood, came from like the mouth
Yep.
and thus was planted. Because like, how would saliva and blood like mixed together have gotten on,
Yeah.
the glove and the knife?
First time I watched this episode, I said, "Isn't spitting in your hand the place you're most likely to spit?" You know when people go like spit in their hand, like rub their hands together
But
for like grip?
I think they already talked about this, but the idea was that he like pierced through the glove, and that was how the
Yeah,
blood
yeah.
got
But
bloody.
like
So it
the
wouldn't.
saliva could be there on like an unrelated
Yeah, yeah,
piece of evidence.
but they
I
seem to think that it's not, that it's
I will,
indicating that the blood
yeah,
must
yeah.
have come from his mouth.
But I'm it's fine. I don't know how likely or unlikely that is. But when the scene was when I was watching the scene for the first time, I was like, that doesn't really feel like that big of a red flag.
Right.
Like such a
Yeah.
possibility. And also kudos on the DNA technology for 2022, being able to tell saliva DNA from blood DNA from
Yes.
because I'm pretty sure your DNA is just your DNA. It's the same in the rest of your
I
body.
think
And a 15-year-old piece of
he
evidence.
said he detected something, which is how he knew it was saliva, but I
There,
can't remember what he
well, he knew
said.
there was saliva there, but that's
Yeah.
what I mean. That's what
Yeah.
I was like, that was like, this is the most like funny piece of evidence, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure. So with this evidence, whether, however they came upon it,
Yep.
or whatever technology that they used to come upon it, brings us to Catherine at a bar with Jimmy, and she's like, "You set him up. Like you set Kelso up."
At this point, I
And
thought he killed him.
well, so does Catherine, because Catherine's
Yeah.
like, "Hey man, I need a sample of your blood. Like, you set this guy up, and come to find out, he was in love with Stephanie. Jimmy was in love with Stephanie, proposed to her. She said no. And Catherine's like, well, this is all starting to look very suspicious now
Yeah.
that we're realizing that Kelso probably did not
Her,
actually kill
her,
him.
her first thing was like, did you like plant the evidence though, right? And then
Yes,
she
she
just,
said she said you set him up. Like,
yeah, yeah.
that was
And
like her first accusation, and then she was like, "Hey, there's another blood source, and like we're
yeah,
gonna need a blood sample from you." So yeah, no, her first thing was like you set him up, but then did you set him up
yeah.
to take the fall for you?
Yeah,
Is
they moved very quickly from setup to murder. But like, I just saying, like initially, I was like, first they were like, I said, oh, okay, this guy's gonna be a murderer.
Yeah,
Spoiler alert, I was apparently wrong.
you are wrong.
It's it's a very, when we get to the end of the episode,
Yeah.
we'll talk about how everything wraps up.
Yes, we will. We have a short scene with Greg, Sanders, and Grissom. Grissom wants him to check out the food in the gum. He wants him to examine the gum, find out what food the person was eating before they started chewing
Hmm.
the gum. Warwick is then with Catherine. He has the results from like the blood sample that they got from Jimmy. Catherine like can't bring herself to open it. Warwick opens it, and then we see Catherine going into a room with Jimmy, and we learn that he's not the murderer. It is not his blood. He's excluded from the murder weapon. But
We
this is where
never learn whose blood this is, right?
no. So this is where
Okay.
Catherine says like there was no hits in CODIS. Like we don't know whose blood it is. Like it's not yours,
The guy from Reno.
but it's somebody's.
Maybe that's his murdering knife, and it's the blood from the other guy he killed.
Man, that would be a twist.
They
That
don't
would be a
say
twisty
that.
twist.
They don't say that, but it could be true.
Twisty twist. But she's like, all right, like you didn't murder her, but you basically let her murderer get away by planting evidence instead of, following the evidence and letting the evidence speak for itself. He gets angry. Like she's like, hey, we're gonna have to charge you. Like I can't like let you walk away from this. Put a man in prison for life on false evidence. Like I can't just let you walk away.
Kudos to Las Vegas, where apparently it's a life in prison sentence for
Yeah.
planting evidence, which I mean does not seem, it seems, I don't know if I would say it seems extreme. It seems more extreme than I thought it would be.
Agreed.
Especially in a place like Las Vegas.
Yes.
Not to judge you, Las Vegas. It's just
No, you're great, Vegas. I'll be in you in a few months. So no judgment.
You're great, Vegas. I'll be in you soon.
I'll be in you soon. And
but yeah, I was like, oh wow, that's a real big deal.
yeah, he gets very angry and is like, I gave you your career and you were about to turn tricks. And first, I want to say this is obviously the show's from 2002. So I think hopefully attitudes are changing, and I think they are. But she's like, I wasn't turning tricks, and she's very adamant about that. In my opinion, regardless if she was turning tricks or not, that doesn't discount her from then having a different career.
Yes.
But I get that this is like 2002, and so they had to be like, she didn't sell her body for sex, like she didn't do that. Like she was just a stripper. She wasn't a sex worker. We support sex workers here. But tangent. Catherine, again, this rewatch is making me adore Catherine in ways I've never adored her. She has like one of the best lines from this episode where she's saying like, well, you sold your integrity. Like in this case, you sold your integrity. And then she's like, who's the whore? And I was like, oh, snap. Oh, snap, Catherine. Just like, she's such a good line. I was like, oh, I love you so much.
She's really intense in these scenes with him.
Yes, she is.
And it's really good. It's really good acting.
It is. Another awesome performance from her. And I think they play well off of each other as well. So kudos to Bruce McGill as well, because I think he did a very good job.
I feel like it's a kind of place where you could easily overact it, and she doesn't.
Yes. She does not.
Restrained, but the emotion in her face is like super like, oh, gut punch.
She's so Nick and I were chatting a little bit before we started recording, and I was lamenting about certain things that have been happening at work, and I was saying, hey, I'm saying this to you like way more professionally or I'm saying it to you less professionally than I did when I spoke to the person at work about it. And that's how I feel like Catherine is doing. Like Catherine is like being very professional and like keeping her cool, but you can like tell that she's like seething underneath the surface.
I feel like she was outside of work that she'd like clock them.
Yes, but she's like,
how could you put me in this position? How could you do that? How could you?
Yeah.
After everything you taught me, like, I can't believe you did this. Like, if they were just being friends in this moment, and she didn't have to be professional.
Yeah, I think it would be very different. Yeah. But she keeps her cool, and she's professional. So that's, well, no, actually, technically the last scene is Catherine, so I won't say that we end that story. I mean, we sort of end that storyline, but technically the last scene goes back to Catherine. So Ananda the monk is then walking down the street. Grissom picks him up. I feel like this is like conflict of interest, and you can't just like pick up a murder suspect, but he does. And as Grissom as Grissom likes to do, just give away details of evidence to potential suspects in murder investigations. So he's letting Ananda know that the gum found in the temple had traces of curry and saffron, and Ananda is like, I also ate curry and saffron, so like I don't know how this helps you.
I'm just incriminating myself more.
But it does, because this brings them into the kitchen of the temple, where we realize that they weren't importing drugs as the kids were thought that they did. They were importing spices, like the real stuff. And Detective O'Reilly enters, and he is kind of questioning Ananda because the funds that they're raising to build the school, there's money missing. Like what was deposited at the bank was less than what they raised. And then we also learned that the bank account was opened on the same day of the murder. So it was like, this is a little suspicious. So before the bank account was open, he was keeping the funds in a box in his office. So they go into the office. Grissom opens the box. There's curry powder inside. Curious. We're then with O'Reilly with Mr. Sudahara, who is the part-time cook. He's chewing gum. He's like in interrogation, he's chewing gum. Grissom walks in. His DNA matches the gum DNA.
Yep. A guy who works there.
Yep.
Who chews gum. DNA matches the gum that is in his workplace. That's definitely murder.
Totally murder. But again,
so this no is where I was like,
no lawyer there to tell him, shut up. Don't say anything.
There's no fingerprints on this gun of his, right? There's
no, it's only the monks.
Other evidence. Their only evidence is that he was in the building and chewed gum there.
Yes.
Even though he worked there several days a week.
Yes.
He could put that gum there on any day of the week.
Yes.
I was like, there's no way this guy's going to jail. I've rewatched that scene. You'd be like, did I just miss them say this?
Yeah, like this key piece of actual key piece of evidence where you're like, oh, all right, yeah, that's where they're getting it from.
Maybe you can get him on stealing.
Maybe
it's still a few spices is kind of a stretch.
But that would also take Ananda to testify, which he doesn't seem like he's willing to testify against him.
No, but they have all the evidence they need to know that money was missing, right? And they know that there was and they have evidence in the box. But still, their only evidence would be like, well, it had to be the cook because there were spices in the box. Not that the people eating the spices could
Right,
ever
that's what
have
I'm saying.
carried the
That's what
spices
I'm.
there,
Yeah, like I just feel
or
like
that he
even
could have
that.
donated money that had those spices on it to the fund. Like
Right.
he would have such a good defense against all of this.
Yeah, but Grissom seems more, instead of like really wanting a solid case, he's just like, yeah,
Yeah.
gum, DNA, done, closed case. We don't need anything further.
Gotcha. He
Grissom
wanted
is
to solve his own
more
puzzle.
Grissom is more curious about why he shot them in the seventh chakra. And Mr. Sudahara is like, I shot them between the eyes. Like
Which
I didn't shoot them in their seventh chakra.
which
I
is
shot them between the eyes.
which is great because now he's just admitted to murder.
Yes. Now it's like, okay, well now you might have a harder
It
time.
doesn't matter what the evidence is.
Yeah.
He just admitted to shooting them.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was great. It's like, yeah, I shot them between the eyes, which yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Doc Robbins.
Yeah, thanks for your
thanks for your
chakra lesson.
assumptive diatribe.
So weird.
Uh,
So then Grissom goes back to the temple and he sees Peter Hutchins Jr. praying with Ananda. So he's in the temple. They're both, praying and chanting together. So that wraps up that storyline. And then our last scene is with Catherine returning Stephanie's evidence to the evidence room. And she writes on the box, do not destroy, case unsolved. So that wraps, not wraps up in a satisfying way, but that wraps up that storyline as well, which brings us to the end of the episode. So Nick, what did you think about today's episode?
I'm not a fan. This is
Okay.
in the running for one of my least favorite episodes.
Ooh,
just
okay.
because I just don't get how this episode ended.
Yeah.
Of both those kids, it's super unfulfilling. We're like, all right, so a guy chewed gum, and so he's a murderer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I get that you have put the pieces together, but you have definitely not put together the breadth of evidence that it will take to indict and convict somebody. Although then he admits to it. And then in the other case, it's just like the guy on his deathbed was like, oh, I didn't kill this person. So we reopened this case and we went through it. And all we got out of it is a guy planted evidence, which means, like, if anything, you should be less sure that the guy, you should believe the guy even more. Right? That there's no murder there. So now there's an unsolved murder. And so, like, my one thing is, like, I really hope this comes back in a future episode. It'll be a lot more. This episode will have more value if later on that case gets closed.
Right. They solve the
5
Stephanie
seasons
case
from now or something, right?
Yeah.
Like, it'll have some value because it would only be possible if Catherine went through this today.
Yeah.
Because they were about to destroy the evidence.
Yeah.
So if that payout happens, it'll lift up my viewing. But it was tough. I first watched the episode. I was like, I don't think I liked it. And I watched it again. There's like, I don't know. There's some parts we have very little work again. We have a very weird Nick. I think it's a pretty good Sarah episode. Another amazing Catherine episode.
Yeah.
And we get Creepy Gil being Creepy Gil this season for some reason.
Yeah.
Just continuing to like not be a professional CSI person for some reason.
I don't get that part either. I think I'm in a similar boat. Definitely not a favorite episode. I don't know if it's like in the running for the worst, but definitely not in the running for one of the best. I
recall the early episodes of the season being not stellar, so I should probably be a little bit more timid with that.
But I also agree that I think there was a lot of great acting in this episode.
Yes.
So it's like the storyline didn't really hold together great, but I think there was like several great scenes and there was some like really good chemistry between actors. So yeah, it's it's all right. It's not the best. It's not the worst. I think there was good acting, but yeah, overall, like the storyline, not the most gripping or well connected.
Yeah. And you are right. Like there's moments, I think in a lot of ways, like it almost feels worse because it's the end of the episode, which is one of the most disappointing parts of the episode.
Yes.
So it's the thing that sticks with you when you're reflecting.
Yeah, when you're reflecting on it, you're like, oh yeah, that ending, like, yeah. They did not stick the landing, if we were going to go with gymnastic terms here. They did not stick the landing.
We've had some like upper level episodes the last few episodes. We've
had some pretty decent ones.
But like they've all been kind of like upper mid, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this one is like all of a sudden like we're kind of going the wrong direction.
Yeah.
So it's no scuba tank in a tree. That's what I'm saying.
It is no scuba tank in a tree. That is true. And I guess we'll see how it compares.
I wanted when they was telling the story, or they had the flashback where the why can't I remember his name? The Bruce McGill character.
Oh,
Um,
Jimmy.
Jimmy, when he was like in the strip club quizzing Catherine on cases, and he's
Yes.
like, it was like we're counting old stories. And he's talking about like a man in a tree, and was he wearing a scuba suit?
Is that how we got up there? Is that how we died?
But yeah, that's why the scuba episode was on my mind.
That's fair. That's fair. So I guess we'll see how this week's episode compares to next when we return with our review of season 2, episode 18, Chasing the Bus. In the meantime, feel free to support us on Patreon. I am going to get some bonus episodes, like bonus content up there, but you'll get a shout out on the show and you will get access to our episodes a day early. So if you can't wait until Monday morning to listen to our show, support us on Patreon and you can hear us a day early and help us, offset some of the costs that come from running a podcast, because sadly not free. You can also find us on Facebook at Who Are You, a CSI podcast. We are also on Instagram and Twitter/X at Who Are You CSI Pod, and you can also email us at whoareyoucsipod@gmail.com. But otherwise, we will talk to you next week.
Who's sports?
No.